Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, wow, that's good. Hey, good morning, everyone. How you doing? I'm Patrick Connor, and I currently teach K-6 computers at a small rural district in western New York. By day, I teach computers. By night, I am a game designer. Our first game is coming out in 2 weeks at the Gen Con conference in Indianapolis. Mage Wars, so really excited about that. So what I have found is that we, in our rural district, we have had a huge influx of technology. We have a number of computers. Within last year, we started a one-to-one computing where all the middle school students had netbooks. Next year, hello there. Technical glitch #1. That's okay. Next year, this coming year, where grades 5 through 12 will all have iPads. And what I've noticed as a technology teacher is that we still don't have the tools as teachers to teach with games. So all these iPads are coming out and they have all these games and great activities for the kids, but we still haven't really figured out, we haven't learned how to teach with those at our district. So one of the things I started doing a number of years ago, and I taught a programming class at the high school, and I wanted to come up with something that could really engage the kids, and so I came up with the idea of let's design our own game, our own video game. So the first step in that, I brought in some board games that I had collected over the years, and we started looking at the different pieces of how you play a board game, the rules, the components, all of that, and we began to try and translate that into the computer and into creating our own game. So kind of a design process. So this was before I got Jesse Schell's book. If you haven't ever read it, I recommend it for everyone. The Art of Game Design. There's a great amount of stuff in there for not only designers, but for educators. So The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. And so we started looking at that, but our district really wasn't ready for kids playing games during class or designing games. So what I did, and you'll bear with me with my presentation, my students, theirs look phenomenal. They teach me everything about Prezi and anything presentation-wise. So why board games? Because we needed at our district some stepping stone to help teach the kids and help teach the teachers and help educate the administration how to use games, how to use play in the classroom effectively. Okay, what can it do? Okay, this is the step that we needed. So, I brought these games into the classroom, and after that class was done, the kids started coming up to me and saying, "Mr. Connor, can you bring those back? Can we play those again?" And so we started having at the high school a meeting maybe once a month after school where we'd play some of these board games. Okay, and the following year, I got transferred over to the elementary school, and the board game club kind of died at that point because there was no one to pick up the mantle at the high school. I get to the elementary school, and I told a few of my teachers, a few of my colleagues, that I was interested in collecting these board games and playing board games, and if anyone would like to use them in the classroom, let me know. I have a huge collection, I'll bring them in. Well, it wasn't until about halfway through the year that one of my colleagues came up to me and said, "Hey, Pat, do you have any board games that deal with Egypt? I want to do something, a culminating activity that has something to do with Egypt. By any chance you have any board games that deal with Egypt? And anyone that knows designer board games will know that there is no limit to the number of Egypt-themed board games that are out there. So it was easy. I went home and I pulled like 4 or 5 games from my closet, and we took them in, and over 2 days, we taught each group. We broke the students up into 4 groups. Each group learned a different game, and they rotate throughout the week. And during that time, we wanted to make it a little more meaningful. This was our culminating activity. It was one of our first attempts at bringing board games to the elementary classroom. So there wasn't a lot of planning beforehand, which is extremely important. We brought them in and we kind of tried to force them into the curriculum. And that was one of our big learning moments. But one of the things that we did with that, though, is we had them using the vocabulary that they encountered throughout their whole unit on Egypt. We started discussions about, one of the games was Cleopatra and the Society of Architects. So with that, we started talking about Cleopatra and what her influence was. We also talked about the architecture and the pyramids, the obelisks, the Sphinx. We talked about all the different things that Egyptian architecture and culture is known for. So it opened up all those pathways. One other game that we had was called a GiE. And in a GiE, you're traveling, placing workers and traveling down the Nile, and you have to be aware in the game whether or not it's a flood season or it's a dry season. If it's a dry season, you're not going to be able to feed your people. And so that brought in a whole discussion about the Nile Delta and farming and agriculture and those sorts of things. So the same thing happened after we introduced those kids to that unit. The same thing happened over at the high school. The kids started asking, when can we play these games again? So now my colleague and I, Chris Collins, he and I sat down and we started really planning a way that we could introduce this in a meaningful way. So the first thing we did was we got a number of students, 4 or 5 students together, and they started having lunch with us every day. And we would teach them a new game every couple of days. We'd teach them a new game. We'd come into lunch, we'd reinforce the game, make sure they knew how to play the game. And so we had this group of 4 or 5 students that were going to be our leaders, and they would teach kids these other games. So here we have an example. This is a game called Hacienda. This game, Hacienda, is all about managing a ranch, almost like managing a farm. You collect it, you build different land tiles, you put animals into your ranch, and then you score points based upon that. And the kids, what they took away from this when they started learning this game here is that they started asking, well, where's the die that I roll? How do I move my pieces? And so it began a discussion about what the difference between a traditional board game was and a designer or a Euro type board game was. And so these board games here rely less on luck and a little more on strategy than some of the ones that our kids were used to. So here in this case, so we have a group of student leaders now that are in charge of, when we started the board game club, they were in charge of teaching their fellow students how to play these games. They were the leaders. And then every so often they would get to switch games so they weren't playing Hacienda for 4 or 5 weeks in a row. And we started this community, and within 2 weeks of starting the board game club, there was only my colleague and I to manage this. And we were giving groups of 25 to 30 kids scrambling to sign up, and we had a limited amount of space. And every Wednesday, they would sign up to stay after school to play board games. These kids would give up their lunch with their peers to come down, learn new board games, and it wasn't just enough that they'd learn the first ones that we taught them. They were coming and asking, what do we have next? What's coming next? So one of the other games that we pulled out was a game called Zoo-Loretto. Zoo-Loretto, you manage a zoo, and there's some rules in the game. There's an economy, and there's rules in the game that tell you what types of animals you can put where, into what pens, and then you, based upon how you manage your zoo, you score points, and that's how you win the game. And so the kids are starting to learn some different resource management, and economy, trying to how they're going to generate money, how they're going to generate resources to populate their zoo, how to manage this little world. This is probably one of the favorite games of the students. This is a little game called Ticket to Ride by an American designer, Alan Moon. And it's sold well over, I think, 30 million copies. And in this game, you collect, there are these train cards at the bottom of the screen, and you collect different colored train cards to try and plot routes across the map of the United States. And you score points every time. The longer train you lay down, the more points you're going to score. Now, you also have ticket cards, destination cards. So students need to try not only plot a route from maybe, say, New York to Washington, but maybe a route from New York to Seattle or New York to Los Angeles. And those ticket cards are worth points. And if you make the route by the end of the game, it doesn't matter which direction you go. You can go from New York to Los Angeles through Seattle. But as long as you make those connections, you get the points. If you don't make the connections, you lose the points. So this is one of the games, this is a Euro game or a designer game that I would call a gateway game. This is a good for anyone that's interested in introducing your school or your family to a game that is very rich, easy to learn. There's only a few choices you have each turn of what you can do. Easy to learn, but it changes every single game. No two games are the same, and there's so much that you can do with this. Here's another game, Carcassonne. This is a tile placing game, which was totally foreign to me. I had no idea. And each turn, the students pick a little tile and they build this world. So this would be on a really small scale, maybe like extremely small, like Minecraft, but in a 2D world, just putting these little flat tiles down and creating this world. And they have the students gain points by placing farmers and knights and thieves on the road. And for this game here, the kids, we could see that their whole visual spatial thinking about what the choices they were making when they played the game was astounding. And in fact, with the group right here, I wouldn't play with them because they would know right at the beginning, they could place a piece and it would score a ton of points by the end of the game, and I would be clueless. So, very good game here. Yes, ma'am? Carcassonne, C-A-R-C-A-S-O-N-N-E. Or maybe two E's? Two S's. Two S's, what? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Or it's on the boxes, so I can't read it upside down there. Yeah. Two S's. Okay, and one of the things we had one of the challenges that we had was my colleague, he's more competitive than the kids. So sometimes we had to kind of keep an eye on him too. So, we don't, but neither of us believe in letting the kids win, but it's not that cutthroat. So. This is another tile building game with an economy built in called Alhambra. And it's an award-winning game. For people that are not aware of it, there is a whole range of awards given every year. They usually announce in the summer, but it's through a European gaming community. They usually announce at a convention gaming conference in Essen, Germany. And so they have a Game of the Year award. And we've collected this. One of the things we've done in our collection is try to get these Game of the Year awards. So we were lucky enough that when we started the board game club, I don't know if many of you remember, maybe you saw this, they were having these Pepsi Refresh grants, and we secured a grant for $5,000 to build up a board game library at our school. And the $2,500 was for board games, and the rest was for family nights, and there'll be some of the things that I talk about later, which was one of the most important pieces of teaching and learning with board games, is to bring the families and the communities in. So we got this group, we got these kids learning these board games, and then the next thing we did was we started having other teachers asking, how is it you're getting 30 kids? Our school only graduates 60 kids a year if we're lucky. We were getting 30 kids, 5th and 6th graders, to sign up to stay after school every Wednesday night. And so they started, our administrator and our other teachers, our colleagues were asking us, what's drawing these kids? So our administrator, this was great, it was probably one of the most meaningful times we had for a faculty meeting. We actually brought in the kids, and the kids taught the teachers these board games that they were learning. And so we spent a whole faculty meeting just trying these board games. This board game right here I haven't shown you yet. I'll talk about it more a little bit later, Pandemic. Fabulous board game. It's a cooperative game. I had never heard of a cooperative game before. This is a cooperative game where the players try to beat the game. Okay? Totally different from what I was used to. Roll your dice, move your pawn. And whoever rolls the best dice over an hour wins. Totally different. Our student was hiding in the corner because she didn't want to have her picture taken. Another cooperative game, Forbidden Island. You have to get the different artifacts before the island sinks into the ocean. This young man right here, he was probably our best advocate for gaming in the classroom, and he was there every night. If we're doing a family night, he was there teaching. During the day, during lunches, he would organize little groups to play games. We even started somehow we convinced the cafeteria ladies to allow some games after they were done, kids were done eating, cleared off the table. They could bring out a few of the games and play those during lunch. He was one of the ones that kind of spearheaded that. Another type of game, this one you made, this is a little more mainstream. Most of the games that I collect, you won't find in Walmart or Target. And here, Blockus is one that I believe you can find. This is a good geometry kind of tile placing game where it's like Tetris on steroids. I refused to play this with my 18-year-old daughter because she can look at any piece. You can see those blue pieces there. They're all in different shapes. She can look at any piece and place it on the board just by looking and seeing there's an open place. Me, I'm flipping it and turning it and pushing it in, trying to hammer it in. Doesn't usually work for me. One of the questions I get asked a lot, and probably the meat of this discussion, what games should I use in my classroom? And so before, when we first started, it was just kind of like anything Egyptian themed. And now we're getting to a point where we can actually say, ask these questions. What are the goals of the lesson? What do I want the students to learn? What do I want them to be able to do? Okay, what are the outcomes? So now we're going through a very much backwards design process, and like understanding by design, Grant Wiggins. So we're taking that process now and we're using that. We're trying to decide what games are best for the outcomes that we want. A couple of resources that you definitely want in your school if you want to bring board games into your school. Number one resource is Libraries Got Game by Brian Mayer and Christopher Harris. They're in the Rochester region. They actually have created a library of board games at their BOCES, and teachers and librarians can sign these games out and bring them to their classrooms. As of right now, I don't believe they're allowed to be signed out to take home. And so a lot of the way we're organizing our board game library is based on the work of these gentlemen right here. And if you really want to be a board game enthusiast, then you need to go sign up at BoardGameGeek.com. BoardGameGeek.com has over 59,000 different board games listed. And they may be different editions or expansions, but they have 59,000 entries just in their board game section. And I go there quite often, number one, to look at different rules discussions. They do have a section where people talk about how they're using them in the classroom. Also different rules. Many of the games that I get are originally produced in other languages. And then I get the English rules, and they're not always translated the best. So this is a good place to go find information about the game, get the correct rules, that sort of thing. So BoardGameGeek.com, a fantastic resource. The other place to go to is the Dice Tower. Tom Bassel, who is one of the leaders at Dice Tower, he has created many videos. I'm not sure how many he has, but many videos that are both reviews and short instructions on how to play the game. And we use Dice Tower anytime we want to give the kids an introduction to the game. Before we sit them down and have them read the rules, we'll have them watch a short discussion about the game and then get Tom's opinions on the game, that sort of thing. So we encourage the kids to, reflect and evaluate the game after they played it later. And there have been a number of games that they have said, you know what, I want nothing to do with this game anymore. I'm done. And then there are some games that they can't get enough of. One of the surprising games for us that and maybe if I thought about it more, it would have made sense, but my colleague was doing a unit on World War II, and we brought out a game called Memoir 44. And it's a tactical combat game that you move tanks and army men around a board, and they have different tactical cards that they can use each turn. And we had a group of kids that every day after school, that's all they wanted to play. And at first they were going through all the different historic scenarios that were in the rule book, and then they started creating their own. And that for us was just, blew our mind. Okay, I wanted to take this, by no means is in order of, these are just 10 games that I would highly recommend people to check out and to take a look at. Ticket to Ride, very easy to learn. They also have different versions where you have Ticket to Ride Europe, and so you can, the number of ways that you can use this in the classroom is just astounding. And I had my mindset when I looked at it. When I look at this, I think, okay, U.S. geography. Then I had a kindergarten teacher, after we did the demo or played the games in the faculty meeting, the teacher started saying, kindergarten, first grade teachers were saying, oh, I can use that for color recognition. And they were coming out with ways for color recognition to use the cards. Then they were saying, oh, what about patterns? What if we made our own board that showed different patterns and kids had to collect the pattern cards? And then I had a 6th grade teacher say, well, what if I created my own map but used New York State so we can concentrate on New York State geography? So they were coming up with all these different ways that they could use this game. And that's one of the most important things that I learned from when I first started teaching is that you want to adapt, don't adopt. So some of these games may not meet your curricular needs. That doesn't mean you can't change them, modify the rules, modify the board, do something so it does meet your needs. So again, adapt, don't adopt. This is probably the game that started the whole designer game revolution. And by designer game, what I mean is they started printing the author's name on the box, trying to give them credit for what they've done. And most of these have come out of Europe. They were called Euro games for a while, but that's not even a correct name anymore because so many are being made in the United States. Settlers of Catan, you produce resources and then you trade and barter those resources with your opponents, and you try to build roads and towns and villages and score points by how you develop your little civilization. Power Grid. And this one also, when you buy this game, it not only has a US side, but also has a European side to it. And so you get 2 games for the price of 1. And in Power Grid, you have an economy that you have to establish, and you produce power for different cities across the board. And the winner is the person that can first buy enough power sources, enough power plants, that will generate enough electricity to power the most cities. Okay? And the problem is, though, you have to buy resources to fuel your power plants for the most point. So the kids are looking at how does coal work, how does oil work, uranium. Okay, and there's actually some wind power and nuclear power. And so that starts whole discussions about green energy and just, in fact, the news recently with India and their power outages across the country. That would be a great way to tie that in. Puerto Rico is the first game that I played that got me introduced to European games or designer games. And in Puerto Rico, each turn, as a player, you take on a different role. Besides role-playing Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of thing, I had never heard of that in a game before. Okay? And so at one turn you might be a settler where you put a plantation down. Or another turn you might go into production where you're producing stuff from your plantations. And you have colonists that, when you create a plantation, you have colonists that work that plantation to produce sugar, corn, and tobacco, and coffee. And then you also can either sell those goods or you can ship those goods. Sell them, you make money. You ship them, you get victory points. And that's another way of looking at board games that I hadn't before. Most board games I had played is if you got to the end, you won. And a lot of these designer games, you score points, and the person with the most points at the end wins. Highly recommend this one. A little bit crunchier than some of the other ones I showed you, but excellent game. Pandemic. This one we talked about. This is the cooperative game. You work as a team of researchers trying to stop the outbreak of different diseases across the world. And you only have so long before those diseases become a pandemic and you lose. And there's a really neat engine in the game where you start curing diseases, it gets harder and harder because other diseases start spreading even worse. So you have to work as a team. And this is another role-playing game. Each person on the team takes on a different role. And you all have to work together and make decisions together how best to solve this pandemic. Right now, probably my family's favorite game, Ristorante Italia. You manage, as a player, you manage an Italian restaurant. You have to first decide what recipes you're going to include in your restaurant. They're by different cards and different decks. Once you choose your recipes, then you have to go shopping in the market and buy your ingredients. Once you buy your ingredients, then you have like 3 rounds to put together a menu at your restaurant. Then a critic will come in and judge who has the best recipe. And they're based upon points that you have. So whatever you have starters, first course, second course, and desserts. And then the person that lays out the best set of recipes gets points for that round. You also generate money. Now, one of the most fun parts of this game is that you can also add wine to your wine list. And you get points if your wine matches your dinner. So, when I remember the first time we were teaching this game in school, and someone said, I'm gonna buy this wine. And one of the teachers popped their head in and said, did I just hear someone say they're buying wine? Yes. There are places in the world that they do have wine with dinner. So, right now, this is my family's favorite game. We can pull it out and play it, and it changes every time. Another thing with these games is there's multiple strategies to win. My daughter specializes in making recipes that score a lot of points. I like putting fancy tables and things in my restaurant to gain a lot of points. So my dinners aren't nearly as good, but it looks really nice. So, and that's usually the way I cook too. In the rule book, there's actually a code that you can get that you can go and get the actual recipes that you've made in the game. So you can sit down and make those. But if I had a family that ate anything besides chicken and ground hamburger, I might try it. Agricola. This was great for me. Latin for farmer. I took Latin in high school. Don't ask me to use any Latin because Mrs. Learning would be very upset that I don't have that with me anymore. But you manage a farm, and you only have a certain number of rounds in order to build the best farm that you can. And it's in a medieval type setting. You have different roles that you can take on. And when you buy the game, the sheep and different resources are denoted by little cubes. You have to buy the expansion and get the little sheeples, the little wooden sheep and the little wooden cows. It just makes the game so much more flavorful. But you have to plant wheat or vegetables and grow your garden. So this is another management type game. It's also a worker placement game. You only get so many actions a turn. So you can add, your family starts out with a husband and wife. You can add more children later, and then they will help you manage your farm and the different resources. Another worker placement game where you have so many workers that you can used to get different resources is Stone Age. And this is my mom's favorite game. She actually goes on a website called Brett Spielwell and plays with people all over the world. She's not very good, she admits it. When she and I play together, we have rules that you don't end the game if you can. You keep playing forever and ever. But she goes on and plays with different people. And this is another collect resources, turn them in for victory points. But you have to use your workers wisely. You also have to feed your people every round. So not only do you have to gather resources, you have to produce food. And lastly, my favorite game of all time is Princes of Florence. In Princes of Florence, you have a player board where you arrange buildings in like a Tetris-like grid, and you hire artisans for different works that you want to produce. And the more things you have in your town here, the more points you're going to score for your artisans that you hire. This one I could play over and over again and never get bored with it. And then again, there's multiple strategies to winning on this. Some people use a strategy where they build a lot of buildings. Some people play the most works that they can play. Some people just try to play 2 or 3 works that score a ton of points. So with a lot of these games, there are so many strategic decisions that kids have to make that it really challenges them to think, challenges them to sometimes work together, challenges them to examine and analyze what their opponents are doing. And we found that has just added so much more to what we do in the classroom and really adds to the questions and things that kids are generating. Okay, here's a couple examples of what we've done so far specifically with the Common Core, just a couple examples. And number one, with language or vocabulary acquisition. Little game called Apples to Apples that was first published by Out of the Box and then bought out by Mattel. In Apples to Apples, you were given a hand of these green cards, and all these green cards are adjectives, and it gives you a little mini definition or other synonyms for what that word means. And actually, you're given a hand of red cards. The green cards, what happens is with the green cards, one of the players will flip over a green card, an adjective card. And then the rest of the players around the table will look at their hand of red cards, which are nouns and noun phrases, and they need to choose the one they think best represents that adjective in the middle. Which one best matches? And they'll put it face down. Then the player that revealed the green card will shuffle those up, and then they'll look at that, and then they'll choose which one they think is the best. Now, when they choose it, whoever chose it gets the green card and scores like a point. And the first person to collect, I think 8 green cards is the winner. So this really, what we did was we took this, we first taught the kids how to play it, and then we took it and had them create a vocabulary journal where in one column we had them put the adjective, and then on the right column we had them put in what word they chose, and then to give us a reason why. After they put the word they chose, when the winner was revealed, we'd have them put also the winning definition and why the person chose that one. So they started using 2-column notes to generate, this list of vocabulary terms. The other thing that we did was the ones that the students really were having trouble with, we used a vocabulary matrix that I got from Marzano's Classroom Instruction That Works, where the teacher gives definition in his or her own words, and also include some nonverbal way to remember that, whether it's a drawing, a graphic, a sound, something to remember that term. Then the students create their own. They create their own definition, and then they provide their own non-verbal way of remembering that word. And then lastly, they come up with some summary sentence or statement. They use the word in correct context. Okay, so that's one of our ways we're tying in vocabulary. Now, again, adapt, don't adopt. We have a couple of teachers that are creating their own apples-to-apples cards and using vocabulary from stories, from textbooks, that sort of thing to help, and adding those right to the pile of cards. So the kids don't even realize it, that they're learning the vocabulary words that they need to learn for their next unit, and it's intermixed throughout the game. One of the other ways that we're hitting on ELA, writing narratives, there's a little card game called Once Upon a Time. You're given a happily ever after card that has some ending, like they lived happily ever after. Then you're given a hand of cards that include different items, places, characters, what they call aspects. And the starting player starts telling a story. Once upon a time, a prince, and if they have a prince card, they lay it down. Once upon a time, a prince, and then anytime you use a word that's a card that you have, you lay it down. However, if you were saying once upon a time there was a prince that had a magical sword, and somebody has a sword card, they can play it down and they pick up the story. So it's a collaborative storytelling game, and the person that gets through their cards and gets to that happily ever after card wins the game. Well, we took this, and what we did to change this around a little bit is we separated all the different types of cards into piles, and as story starters, we had kids choose one card from each pile, and then they would get that set of cards, and they would have to start writing a story using those cards. And so again, their writing would change every time, and they were really interested in what they would get. Oh, what am I going to get this time? And that encouraged them to write. And lastly, one of our teachers, math teachers, she had used Block this before, but was trying to find something really to focus in on. We used the grant to buy her 5 copies of Battleship that she uses to teach coordinate geometry. And I can tell you, I've been in that classroom. Every single moment, each one of those kids was engaged. They have worksheets that went along with it. They had to plot the different points on the worksheet as well as on the board. They had to use the correct terminology and name the different coordinate points. And it translated right over to when they were doing their regular geometry in their math unit. She stayed with that grid, but when she transitioned over, she used the same grid from Battleship, and then took it one step further and scaffolded it so that in the end they were using the regular coordinate grid they used for geometry. Yes, ma'am? Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, folks, that's what I have. Do you have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Where online, they can still get the information on the book,
There's a couple different options that we've had that the administration is still a little bit hesitant about, opening up that access, having kids playing games online. When a couple of years ago, we had it open so the kids could play some of the board games online when we were designing the games. And then as soon as that class was done, that access got shut off. And now with the iPads, there are a number of iPad versions of some of these games. I'm really curious as if we're going to be able to get those. So right now, the games are being allowed in a pretty controlled environment. So we'll see what happens. We have explored it, but we don't have a definite word yet. Yes?
You make some of your own games, right?
Yes.
Do you have resources for the creation of custom cards or boards?
Yes, and I wanted, there is one, and if you can find, it might be in Jesse Schell's book, The Art of Game Design, but there is an online source where you can actually go and buy the pieces to the game and have custom cards made. You send them a PDF, and it will, they'll print it for you and box it up and ship how many ever copies you buy, they'll ship it right to you. And so you can design your own. Right at the moment, I can't remember the name. I will before we leave. In fact, Mr. Nevins, that's your job. Find out for me where you can print your own game. Yes. Yesterday, I heard so many things yesterday and today that we're doing with this as well. And one of the things Joel had said yesterday was that he starts every activity on the rug. Before every board game meeting, we always start on the rug and we talk about what we expect, what our expectations are. There was a zero tolerance for any bullying or bad sportsmanship. And we only had one incident in a full year of anyone breaking that. And that was to be expected. So really, we never had a problem. They just really enjoyed playing the games. Another thing that helped is some of these games last an hour and a half, 2 hours. And we only had them at the end of the school day for about an hour. So they never really finished the game. So that kind of, and if we bring them in for lunch periods, we'd only have 30, 40 minutes with them then too. Sometimes we did. We'd save the game, take a digital snapshot of it, and then reset the game later. We also had, there's another game that I didn't bring called Hive. It's, you start with insect pieces, and it's almost like a chess game, free-form chess game, and your different insects can move different positions. And we actually had enough copies that we had a Hive tournament, and it was very competitive. And but everyone still was really good sports, and we let them know right at the beginning. And for the most part, they have to be up to date with all of their classwork as well. So that was a good incentive motivator for board game play. Yes?
You've been doing this a few years, young students, started in high school. Have you seen any transition from high school to young students or faculty?
We haven't seen it transition to the faculty yet, but we have with the students, because some of our students have moved up from elementary school to high school, and they've been asking almost daily, where are board games? So right now it's trying to find somebody that can get to the high school and that would take on that mantle of supervising kids. One of our best things that we did, though, I talked about, was having a community night, and we brought in families and the community to play games, have food, and that was a big help, and I think we'll see more participation afterwards. I think that's it, folks. I'll stop by here for questions. So thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it.